All right. Good morning. Good morning to everyone out there. Thank you for joining our Galilee Men's Bootcamp series, our ministry. This is a ministry at Galilee that encompass young boys as young as age 11 through the elders of the elder men that we have. Our mission for Bootcamp is it's in the name of our acronym Bootcamp, which stands for Because of Others' Testimony. Christ answered my prayers. And that's our motto, that's our mission statement, that we reach men and we help men to by testifying, each man reaching another man or a young man, that they too may live an abundant life. That's what we're doing today. So today we'll be discussing men's health during the pandemic. Today, Pastor Wilson, who normally is our facilitator, he will not be joining us. He has a funeral that he is driving. He's actually on the road right now to Natchitoches for one of our dear sisters, two of our dear sisters. Their mother passed away, so he's on his way down there. I'm Deacon Stephen Grant. I'm also principal at Green Oaks Performing Arts Academy, and I am the facilitator, and I'm also the chairperson for our boot camp. Today, we have with us Dr. Timor Dixon, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself to you guys. Dr. Dixon.
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Timor Dixon, and I'm a family physician here in Shreveport. I work with the Willis-Knighton Health System at two of their community care clinics, the one across the street from Galilee on Pierre Avenue, and also the one out by Southern University on Hillary Huckabee. I've worked for Willis-Knighton for 21 years now, and I am originally from Shreveport.
All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, Brother Bloomer. I see some of the brothers coming in. Brother Dizadair, thank you guys for joining in. If you're able to share this, then make sure you share this with others. All right. So we're in the midst of the pandemic, and, we've been with this pandemic now more than a year that the U.S. has actually identified and declared it. We've been a year. Other countries have been a few months or more ahead of us. However, we're talking about men's health, and we're going to actually even get a little specific to African-American men's health during this pandemic and how it is having an effect. And we wanted to invite a professional, so an expert, someone who could come in and shed a little more light on that. So we're going to get started with this. And here's our leading statement here. We talked about the COVID-19 pandemic is shining a cruel light actually on the state of men's health globally. It's really having a real impact. Out of 38 out of 43 countries, men are actually leading in the number of deaths that we have, despite similar confirmed cases in each sex. So the question is, Dr. Dixon, who is at most risk for severe illness from COVID-19? When we're talking about men in particular, but who is at most risk? You can just give us your take on that.
Well, certainly anybody with pre-existing conditions are at higher risk. Those include obesity, diabetes, hypertension, chronic lung disease, and certainly there are some racial disparities out there. I mean, people of color are at much higher risk than white people, and that includes Native Americans, that includes Latino, and certainly that includes Blacks. I mean, if you look at the rate of death, I mean, it's actually higher in Native Americans, but second, it's high in African Americans and then Latinos compared to whites.
And so, you kind of touched on something about the chronic diseases that a lot of people have. So is this something, and there'll be a future question I'm going to ask, but is this something that we can specifically identify to just the habits within each culture, or is there something even more specific than that?
So certainly that may have something to do with the habits in our cultures, but it may even have something to do with the habits specifically of people in different parts of the country. I mean, we know here in the South, I mean, there's a higher incidence of obesity. And I mean, if you look at the concentration of the African American population, there's a higher density in the South. And so, you know, you put those couple of things together and, you know, we see that there's some of the reasons why there is a high incidence in African American people. We have a, you know, a higher density of people with diabetes. You know, we have a higher density of people with obesity, higher density of people with hypertension. So all those a lot of those chronic diseases that increase your incidence of complication, you know, those are concentrated in people of color.
Oh, yes. Now, you know, within the church, one of the things that we have, especially, and I'll associate with the Black churches, Baptist churches in particular, oftentimes our people will rely on prayer. We know prayer works. We know prayer can do a lot of things, but sometimes we have where people will rely on um, uh, just strictly in the spiritual, but not taking advantage of what God actually provides for us, which is doctors and nurses and hospitals.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So certainly. I mean, you know, people pray, you know, for people pray for a lot of things, and sometimes, you know, the answer to their prayers is before them, but they don't accept, you know, those prayers. I mean, like you mentioned, there's doctors, there's nurses, there are other healthcare professionals that are put here to help people, and so you have to be willing to accept those things, you know, when they present themselves. And so a lot of people, you know, will look past those things and say they're just going to continue to pray when the answer to their prayers is before them, and they just don't see it, you know. So certainly those people have been put here to help, you know, us, you know, and you know, we have to look at it like that, you know. You know, there are people here to do the works of God, you know, and so when those people present themselves, you know, allow those people to do their jobs, you know. So
And I agree totally with that because oftentimes I know I may be called by someone to pray for them, and after I have prayed with them, then I start asking them questions like, "Have you seen your doctor?" And I've had people to actually say to me that God is in control, and my response to them is always, yes, he's in control. He has provided you with medical assistance and so forth. And we know sometimes there are things that prevent people from doing that, but you're absolutely right. Recently, we just saw on the news where a number of states have just totally lifted the entire ban on wearing masks and have opened up to 100% capacity in all areas of restaurants or athletic venues and so forth. Um, uh, um, and some states have had just a slow, release. We know Louisiana moved to stage 3, which is going to allow more people to gather, but they have not they have not lifted the bans on wearing masks. But our sister states on both sides of us, Texas and Mississippi, have gone 100. Tell me what do you think is one? What do you think is behind that? And then tell me what do you think is this a good move or what do we need to really be doing?
well, I think that was a political decision. I don't think that was based on science. I mean, Greg Abbott, I think, just made that decision to take some of the heat off for some of the other problems he has in the state. You know, the problems that presented themselves during the snowstorm, the electrical problems, the water problems, and it was a way of getting, you know, that heat off of him. And so I think that was a political decision. It certainly wasn't based on any science. And I think some of the people in the state still know that they need to continue to wear a mask, and those people are going to continue to wear masks. Those people who weren't wearing masks at all in the first place is just reinforcement for them. Uh, I, I recommend that. So.
Okay. Yeah, your screen kind of frees up a little bit, but we kind of hear a little bit of what you said. But for what I gathered, what you're saying is that a lot of these states have him. We've kind of lost him right now. I'm just trying to continue until he can get back on. But a lot of states have taken this as have made this pandemic a political um, uh, weapon. They've weaponized it as far as politics go, and are playing with the livelihood of people. And we see that in a lot of this, where they're politicizing and weaponizing this as a means to gather people, and they're playing on the frustrations of people. Yes, people are frustrated about certain things, but this is an attempt, as you said, Dr. Dixon, for many of them to take a lot of political heat off of themselves, and I dare say to even possibly even try to undermine this new administration, presidential administration that's just coming in. So let me pose this question to you. Here's a statement, and I really wanted those of you who are online. Good morning, Brother Henderson, Brother Davis. Thank you guys for joining us. Here's a discussion statement I'm going to lead with. Black Americans, as you stated earlier, are affected with COVID-19 at nearly 3 times the rate of white Americans. According to a new document from the National Urban League, the report, based on data from Johns Hopkins University, also shows Black Americans are twice as likely to from die from this virus. So we talked about earlier many of the reasons for this, and so one of the things has to be said is, do these observations, and this is a question I'm going to be asking. I think we lost him again. Here he's back. Here we go. So as I said, with African Americans dying at nearly 3 times the rate of white Americans, do these observations qualify as evidence of healthcare disparities, or whether or not it's just strictly biological factors playing into effect?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors that go into, some of those numbers. Certainly access is a problem. Access to healthcare is a problem, and certainly, some people do access medical care later in their disease state, when it is a little bit harder to treat. So that is one factor, and that may be due to transportation problems. There are a number of issues that get that person to the doctor. But once that person does show up at the doctor, there are some issues there too. There may be some implicit bias when a person comes in and they're talking to a person of another race. That person comes into that situation with their own history and their own belief systems. And so sometimes people don't take seriously, the symptoms that a person's having, and so sometimes Black people are more likely to be sent back out of the door, even though their symptoms may be just as serious as a white person. And so there are problems before you get to the doctor's door or the emergency room, and then there are problems once you're there also. And so there are a lot of factors that go into that. And so certainly I think there is some implicit bias. There are actually studies out there that show that implicit bias exists. There are studies on medical residents and their belief systems concerning Black people that are out there that have documented this, and there are other studies that have documented this. So this is a real phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know from my world that I work in schools, in the school system, I can see some of the disparity between just the students I have. And I have nearly 99% African Americans, but those who are living a lot lower on the economic scale, they typically, if they're staying at home and they're just sort of battling it on their own, and because many of them are young, and they kind of believe, since young people have not been exhibiting some of the symptoms, although they can be a carrier of it, sometimes I have parents that will send students back to school. And I just thank God that we have a measure in place where we're checking temperatures, and if someone has a fever, the district gives us the right to have them go home, and the parents will then be given information on what they need to do. But we have a number of people who will send their children to school, and the child would have been exposed and sometimes had actually tested and came up positive, but because they weren't feeling bad, they sent them back to school. And so I think what winds up happening is the knowledge of the people of this disease and how they may kind of get real laxed about it. And I throw this in for our students who are really on that lower level economically. Coming to school does a number of other things for them. It provides meals.
Absolutely. It provides meal, it provides security. I mean, sometimes school is a safe place for a child to be during the day, and so, if a parent has to go to work, they want that child to be supervised and be safe for the day. And so that is their safe place for that day. And that is an issue. Schools provide, many resources that we need to realize that they do, and so it's a hot meal for the day for that child sometimes, so that we have to take into account, And when students do have to be out with an illness like this, we need to, if possible, provide some resources for them, especially if they're out for extended periods of time.
Yeah, and one of the things that this pandemic has done, if anything, and I say this to everybody, it exposed the lack of equity in not only education, but in health service provision. I mean, it really shined a light on how we are not equitable at the school system, because the technology, we found out that schools really did not have the technology that they should have. And so we were never one-to-one ratio, which would help bring about equity. We had some kids whose parents, they have laptops and computers at home, and so they were always ahead educational as far as resources. And we found out that the schools were not providing equitable educational opportunities as it started. And that if it's anything that is maybe actually a silver lining or a blessing, is that schools have now had to do what they should have been done years ago, decades ago. I almost say this to some, that this is almost likening to segregation, where African Americans had a school building, whites had a school building, but the books and the resources at the black schools were very subpar and low compared to the white schools. And even though everybody's paying their taxes to the same system, we see that. So the inequity within education, to me, was exposed with this pandemic. Okay?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the other things is, if you look at internet service, there are some neighborhoods where if there is one internet service provider, that may be the only one, compared to some more affluent neighborhoods where they have many choices of internet service providers to provide internet service. And that kind of varies, depending on what part of the country you live in. But certainly there are places that should have high-speed internet service that don't have access, and so that's a problem.
Yeah, and you said something that is true. Now with the vaccination effort going on, you got a lot of people, they cannot go online to register because what you said, they don't have internet access, they don't have. And so what we've been doing in the school system, and I thank Dr. Goree and his staff for getting the relationship with this internet providers. We've been providing hotspots for people in their homes so that they can have it to do that. But when you think of those in the rural areas in which there's no internet, schools up in the northern part of our parish have been struggling with that. And then just think of those who are in the neighborhood. Even up there on the MLK area where I'm at, we have an apartment complex. They don't have and could not receive internet services there. So we had to provide hot boxes, as they call, for them to be able to work from home. Otherwise, our students were having to come up to the school, download whatever they could download, and then they can go back home and work on it on their computer, then come back up to the school, and then upload it so that they can receive credit for their assignments. Now, that's very difficult if you don't have a car or you live
Absolutely.
3, 4, 5 miles away from the school. And so that's what I said, that this pandemic really shed a light on that. And now that we're in the stage where we were starting to see a decrease, but now with all of these openings, people are feeling as liberties that it's gonna spike again. But the people who need to register online won't be if they don't have those opportunities to do that. So now, what I want to do now, I want to kind of segue to something we did, and for our guests, those who have logged on, I want you to participate. We're gonna do some fact or fiction to see how all men and everyone out there, how are you with your knowledge about things to prevent or cure you from catching COVID or getting over COVID, because there's a lot of things out there that people do. And as African Americans, we come from a people that have a lot of different home remedies that we have used for years, but people are doing things that does not prevent COVID, and nor does it cure them from COVID. And so I'm going to ask these questions out there. Those of you online, you can type in your question. Brother Steele, try to make sure you can catch someone who answers it. I'm going to give them a moment to answer it, and then Dr. Dixon will give more background to it, and I'll let you know if it's fact or fiction on these things here, okay? So here's the first one here, because you hear people talk about it all the time. And this is for our guests, so type this in as fast as you can out there. Vitamins and mineral supplements can cure COVID-19. Want to give everybody out there, vitamins and mineral supplements can cure COVID-19. Many people take vitamin D, C, zinc, and so forth. You hear all of these things coming out, and there's been these supplements businesses stocks went way up, and so Brother Paul Dizadare says it cannot. Dr. Dixon, what is it? Tell them what it is.
So, certainly that's correct. None of that can prevent COVID. Now, I mean, certainly people who have vitamin deficiencies are unhealthy in general are going to fare worse, but none of those things are going to prevent a COVID infection from occurring. And so, social distancing, the mask, everything that we've been told, is what we need to do to help prevent an infection. So you have to be careful, and certainly we want to be healthy and lead a healthy lifestyle, but none of that's going to prevent you from getting a COVID infection.
Right, because at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw people rushing to go buy all of these things. And while that's a good thing to have, it does not prevent that. So we want to clear that up for our audience. Do not give people this false hope that if they take more of this, that'll keep them from getting it. That's not true. All right. One of the products that was pushed by former President Trump, said that hydrochloroquine has a benefits in treating COVID-19. So I'm saying it to our audience. Does hydrochloroquine does it positively affect you and benefits, and is it a good thing to treat COVID-19? True or false? True or false? Does it help with that? Waiting for a response to that second question. Does and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, hydroxychloroquine. Brother Davis Jr. said false. So what is the correct response? Does this is it beneficial for this in treating COVID-19?
So certainly early on in the pandemic, there were some anecdotal studies that showed that hydroxychloroquine might benefit people who had a COVID infection. But as the pandemic went on and we had further studies, those studies didn't show that there was a substantial benefit from hydroxychloroquine. So, you can tout the benefits of a medication, but remember, these medicines were never intended to treat a COVID infection. I mean, Hydroxychloroquine is an old medication, been around for many years. It was used to treat malaria, and also it is used by hematologists often for some disorders. And so it does have some medical benefits, but in treating COVID infections, it hadn't shown any significant benefit in people with COVID infections.
Right. And we know that the president caused a huge controversy by pushing this and even claiming that the medical field did not know what they were talking about in that. And it had many of his followers rushing to get that and were not getting the benefits from it.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there were some people early on in the pandemic who died from ingesting hydroxychloroquine because
That's right.
some people had access to it because it actually is used. It's used in the like kind of in the marine industry, as for people who have saltwater fish. And there were some people who went in and ingested this at doses much higher than they should have, and there were people who actually died from ingesting hydroxychloroquine.
And you mentioned something about marine. So here's the next question, guys out there. Does water or going swimming, uh, uh, does that transmit COVID-19 virus for me to be swimming in the pool? I go to the pool or go to the beach. I'm from South Carolina, so I grew up going to the beach a lot. Water and swimming, does that transmit the COVID-19 virus? We'll wait for y'all response. True or false? Swimming with somebody will increase the transformation or the transmitting of COVID-19. You getting in the water, you in the water swimming with them, you go down, they in the water too. True or false? Does swimming or water transmit COVID-19 virus? I'm waiting to hear from you guys out there. All right, Brother Norman Davis and Brother Paul. Okay, we got country. Brother Paul says it's true. Brother Davis says it's false. So, Dr. Dixon, what is it? Does me going swimming, I'm getting in the water, you in the water, does that transmit COVID-19 virus?
So there's a saying I remember from one of my science classes many years ago, and it says dilution is a solution to pollution. And what that means is that, if you can make something so small in the environment, then it has less of an effect on a person. And so certainly, as far as pools go, bleach kills almost anything. I haven't seen much that bleach won't kill. And pools have a high, chlorine content, and so that kills almost anything. The chance of you getting COVID from the water in a swimming pool, that is very, very small. I mean, it'd be very small for that to occur. And if you're in the ocean swimming on a beach or something, like I said, that water is constantly moving. It's diluted so much that the chance of that occurring is very unlikely. It's very unlikely to occur.
Yeah, and so that's false. People kind of have these things here. That's false. So, Brother Norman Davis, you're correct with that. Now, here's a big one because I saw people got lonely during this pandemic and they were quarantined and so forth. And so here's one, and this is for people out there. Drinking alcohol will protect you against COVID-19. Is that true? Brothers out there, uh, because of what alcohol sometimes are used in the old Western days to treat wounds. We see that on TV all the time. But drinking alcohol will protect you against COVID-19. True or false? Waiting for you brothers to respond out there. Brother Paul Dizadale says no. I'm waiting to hear from somebody else. Okay. Someone who's logged on with the Galilee Baptist Church said that's false. So what is it then, Doc?
Well, certainly that's not true. And as a matter of fact, I would think that if you have a heavy intake of alcohol, that might actually be detrimental. I mean, it's affecting your overall health and making it more likely for you to have a problem. Certainly, alcoholism is a big problem during this pandemic, and it's something that we need to be very careful about. I'm going to be very interested in the rates once they go back and look at the rates of alcoholism during this time, how many people have started drinking and how many health-related problems that, are going to occur because of this pandemic that are alcohol related. And so, some people use alcohol as a crutch to deal with some of the anxiety and some of the social isolation, but that may end up being a much bigger problem, and than we think, and so we have to be careful about using alcohol to deal, with the stress and anxiety caused by this pandemic.
Yeah, and I threw that question in there because oftentimes when people get certain colds or head colds, you hear people making what they call hot toddies and all of that. And and then, and I told a friend of ours, that's all that's going to do is make you sleepy. It's a sedative, so
Absolutely.
all you're going to do is go to sleep, and then your body going to heal in of itself. But it ain't the alcohol that's going to heal you. So you just doing that because you want to have a drink. So just go have a drink and go to sleep. All right. So here it is. We have a lot of people. We know people going through the airports, school buildings, and other buildings, federal buildings, are using thermal scanners and so forth. So, can thermal scanners, all of you out there, thermal scanners, people out there go through these all the time. It gives you a level of comfort. Thermal scanners can detect COVID-19. True or false? Thermal scanners can detect. I just went and got a chest X-ray on my chest, and it revealed I still had. Actually, I had to go get a what they call it, not a CAT scan. I forgot what they call it, but and it just showed I had still pockets of it in my lungs. But we're talking about that. So can you do that? You brothers out there, answer that question. Thermal scanners, uh, is it? Brother Paul Desider said it's true that thermal scanners can detect COVID-19. Anybody else out there? Because, the airports are using them on a lot. So, Doug, what is the question? What is the answer? Is it
So,
true or false?
so these thermal scanners can detect a fever, but it can't necessarily detect a coronavirus infection. And we know that there are people who have asymptomatic infections. Some people, not everyone has fevers, with a coronavirus infection. And that person, even though they may be asymptomatic, can pass that infection on to another person. And so I wouldn't get overconfident that you don't have a fever and that your thermal scan is normal. It's still possible to have an infection that you can pass to a friend or family, a loved one, and they may get sick from it, even though you may be fine. You may feel fine.
Mm-hmm. Ms. George, Tiffany George, go unmute yourself, and then I'll want you to go ahead and introduce yourself. We're nearing the end, but come on in and introduce yourself to our audience.
Good morning. I apologize. I was on another health Zoom. My name is Tiffany George. I'm a nurse practitioner at Willis Nye. I currently work with Dr. Dixon in primary care, and I just want to thank him for the opportunity for inviting me to join in with you all today.
Okay. Well, and we're going to have some specific questions. A question for you. We're towards the end. We're doing a fact and fiction, and we're getting trying to educate people on some of the myths out there concerning COVID as it affects. We're dealing primarily with men's health, but it's just information that everybody needs to know. And so, as Dr. Dixon was just saying, thermal scanners cannot detect COVID-19. We have a policy. That's why in our school system we have certain things when students don't feel well. We don't know if they have COVID or not, but if they have a fever, we call their parents. The parents gonna bring them home. So if they say they feel bad, we're gonna send them home anyway. But we always want to know, so we don't say. And I had an incident in which I had to remind a teacher, do not tell someone that these students have COVID, because we're not doctors. We haven't diagnosed them. We haven't tested them. They go to our health room and they wait there until the parents can pick them up, and then we disinfect the room. So people often times have this mistake because a person may have a fever and not be COVID, and then they could students in particular. We know young people can test positive for COVID and not have a fever. So it's one of those things. But one of the things going through a lot of things that are done is being done so that the public feels safe. So if I see everybody going through a scanner and it's scanning people and it stops this person and say, hey, you got a fever, and they pull you to the side, you can't get on the plane, it makes me feel like, oh, wow, they're catching people with COVID when they're not catching people with COVID. So I want everybody out there to understand, just because you get your temperature taken, that is not the COVID test, getting your temperature taken. All right. So here's another one that's out there. And you guys out there, chime in again. I'm talking about our audience. Exposing yourself to the sun or temperatures, high temperatures, will protect you and help increase your body to resist COVID-19. I'm asking all of you out there. So exposing your sun, they say going out in the sun, getting the vitamin E from the sun, that will help protect you from COVID-19. True or false, guys? True or false out there? Talking to our guests. Give y'all a chance to chime in on that. Going outside in the sun. Waiting for responses for. If you don't know, just go ahead and say, I don't know. Because this has been out there. Brother Paul Dizadel says true. He says true. Exposing yourself to the sun or temperatures, high temperatures, will protect you from COVID-19. So to our guest panelists, our expert, what is the answer? True or false?
That's false. Certainly, people during this pandemic time, there are a lot of people who are tending to stay inside, and certainly I encourage people to go outside and get sunlight, just to and exercise outside. But that's not going to prevent you from getting the coronavirus. And so you still need to protect yourself. If you're coming into contact with other people, you still need to wear your mask. But again, I encourage people to go outside, but that in of itself is not going to prevent you from getting the infection, though.
Right. In one of the notes that it has said you can catch COVID-19 no matter how sunny or hot the weather is, because there are countries with hot weathers have reported cases of COVID-19. So as you said, to protect yourself, we do the things that have already been put out there. Ms. George, you want to add anything to that?
Like Dr. Dixon said, being in the sunlight does not prevent against the COVID. Like he said, we do recommend sunlight just because of its vitamin D that you can absorb. But unfortunately, it's just not one of those things that's a myth.
Right. And now I want to enter this one here, because this one is, I hear people say this all the time. So so you guys out there, please don't be afraid to guess and be wrong. We want to clear up for you and clear up for others, because you actually probably represent a lot of people who think this way. So here's the thing. And Brother Paul said, I need the vaccine. All right, well then, Brother Paul, let me ask you this question here, and anyone else on here. Antibiotics, we hear about that all the time. Antibiotics can prevent or treat COVID-19. True or false out there, our audience, our listeners out there? Antibiotics can prevent COVID-19. Someone with the Galilee Missionary Baptist Church said that's true. Antibiotics can prevent COVID-19. So what's the answer, panelists?
So antibiotics don't prevent coronavirus infection. First of all, you got to remember that coronavirus is a virus, and an antibiotic fights bacterial infections. Now, there are some people who have coronavirus infections who can get a secondary bacterial infection. That does happen sometimes. That happens with a lot of viral infections, where you can get a secondary bacterial infection. And so antibiotics are sometimes used to treat secondary infections, but it's not going to prevent the primary viral infection from occurring. So we have to be very careful about that. There are some antiviral medications that are used once you have coronavirus that can help with your symptoms. These are some very specialized medicines that right now are that have been approved with that emergency use authorization, and they're Some of them are kind of still experimental, but some of them are being used in the hospital to treat patients who have infections. And some of those are looking promising. And I've known some people who've received some of those medications, and they have made patients feel better faster. But again, that's not a preventative, and so no antibiotic is going to prevent you from getting coronavirus.
And so, and I want to throw that out there because we hear people talk about it a lot. And as I said, one thing that people did was capitalize on the fears of people. And you saw ads and commercials about getting supplements and getting these antibiotics. And you would go to the stores just like you couldn't find bread and water. You go over there, you couldn't find some of these things they were talking about you ought to get. And because people capitalize on the fears and on the ignorance of people. And we want to make sure that we try to educate people as much as we encourage them to live a healthy lifestyle, especially for African Americans and in particular African American men, that we want to do that. And so the last thing I want to end on and let you guys kind of talk about it, there's a lot of fears out there right now concerning the vaccine and the taking of the vaccine. Give me your perspective of where you think this fear is based in, and what is the suggestion you would have of the people?
Well, I think a lot of the fears of the vaccine are based on some of our history, and certainly, a lot of people will, refer back to some of the Tuskegee experiments with syphilis and kind of some of the distrust that has occurred as a result of that. And there are even other experiments that have happened in the United States in the past that don't even get as much attention. For instance, there was some experiments on soldiers during World War II with mustard gas. And most of those soldiers that those experiments were done on were either African American, Latino, or Japanese soldiers who were Americans. And so some of those people had lifelong problems related to some of the experiment that was done. And the United States government had to compensate some of their families and some of those patients for the rest of their life based on some of those experiments. And so I think there's kind of a general distrust of the government because of that, and that has affected people's ability to be confident in the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. But you got to remember, hopefully we all learn from the mistakes that have occurred in the past. There have been many people who worked on these vaccines, and a lot of people who worked on these vaccines are African Americans. And as you may know, one of the principal investigators was a young Black lady, a very brilliant young Black lady that worked on one of these vaccines. And so I think we're in this coronavirus emergency, and it is imperative that we get control of this pandemic so we don't get further variations in this virus, which may be more deadly and maybe more infectious.
Okay. And Ms. George, I got a question from one of the guests out there, and it said, will getting yourself in the best physical health as possible help you encounter and battle with COVID-19?
While we, recommend research and evidence suggests that even being in the best physical health, there has still been cases of COVID transmission. And, we see in the media, we've heard the stories where people have been in, optimal health and they still have contracted the virus and possibly passed, or they still have residual symptoms such as heart or lung issues that they did not have before. So being in the best health that you can be certainly can help your body. But again, we, recommend that you are hand washing, wearing your mask, taking, multivitamins if, you choose to, and also just making sure, that your blood pressure, some of those comorbidities such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, are factors that we see a lot with coronavirus, which also, makes it difficult if you, contract it, because then you have a sequel of events, So we do encourage people to be in the best health and shape that they can be in, in case you do come in contact with the virus, your body can hopefully recover and give your immune system a chance to do what it needs to do and not have to work so hard where you're hospitalized.
And I'm glad that question came up because we see right now all of these athletes and these sports teams, someone they were exposed, and then hey, 3 days later, this guy's back playing again. And so sometimes I think that's giving people a false narrative about themselves. They don't realize the extensive health care and professionals that they have at those sports teams and things that they're doing with them. And as you said, also these guys are also oftentimes at top peak physical health. They oftentimes are secluded from anyone else. We saw with the NBA last year, they didn't even have their families. They were in a bubble and they all stayed there, so they were able to control it. But since most people don't live in a vacuum like that, I want you guys to kind of end and just end giving us some advice or tips, and maybe some if people want to further engage you for information, how they can reach out to you. So I'll start with you, Miss George. Just end with us. Give the people out there information and things that they could use.
As we kind of go through these phases right now, the state of Louisiana is currently in phase 3, and our neighbors are now at 100%. So we are still cautioning the public to continue wearing masks, continue to limit those large gatherings. Social distancing is still of the utmost. As we said, we know the coronavirus that we've came in contact with, but now there are variants out there, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Just retaining optimal health is one of those things. Again, hand washing, masks, and just trying to take care of yourself the best way you can, limiting your exposure or where you are, or just taking those necessary precautions to protect yourself and your loved ones is going to be of the utmost importance. And if you have questions concerning the vaccine, certainly, that's not one of those things you want to go into with uncertainty. So we, would say, make sure you talk to your healthcare provider about your risk and what you can do, as far as the vaccine itself, if it's a good option for you.
Dr. Dixon?
Okay, I want to. I'm glad Tiffany had a chance to join us today, and I just want to make this point also, and it's kind of relates to something we were talking about earlier about healthcare providers. Being the kind of the people that God sends to help. And one of the things I find with men, since we're talking to men today, is that sometimes men have a hard time accepting advice from women, and that's a big problem. I recently had a patient who had a very, very serious medical problem, was seen in the emergency room, was hospitalized, but he felt like, since the information was coming from a female doctor, that he either didn't believe it or didn't find it significant. And he had a very serious medical problem, left the hospital against medical advice. And I saw him in the office, and I was telling him, I'm like, listen, this problem that you have is very serious. It could be a life-threatening problem, and you left against medical advice, and that doctor was telling you the absolute truth. You can't dismiss something just based on the way a person looks, whether that's the person's race or whether that person is female. You have to take advice as it is given, and if that is good advice, you need to take it, and so men need to be very careful when they see, female medical providers, to take the advice that is given and the manner in which it was given. So I agree with everything Tiffany said about about the coronavirus pandemic, and so we just need to be vigilant, not allow our guards to be let down at this point. We are starting to see some gains, but we don't want to step back or lose ground at this point, because we're opening too soon, and before we've actually won this battle. We don't want to end up taking steps back and end up having to go back and reformulate a lot of these vaccines to deal with problems we could deal with now. So.
Yeah, and listen, I want to thank you guys for coming on, because this has been some great information here. I hope our audience out there that you were able to gain a lot. We know there are some people who believed in some of the myths or the things that are not true concerning it, and we want to make sure that as we go out, that we're as educated as much as we also want to be healthy, because the more we know, the better we can do. And so we want to take advantage of that. You know, where there's no knowledge, the people perish is something that we have to be reminded of. And oftentimes, our people, we don't like to admit it, but oftentimes we operating on what we think we know instead of what is actual fact. I'm a descendant of some Geechees in South Carolina. I'm a Geechee. I'm from that Gullah culture. And we have all sorts of remedies that would be used to treat all sorts of things. And sometimes our people tend to think, well, that's affecting that group, so I ain't got to worry about that. And that's just not true. So, guys, be safe out there. Once again, Ms. George, thank you for joining with us. Dr. Dixon, appreciate you guys. Love y'all for coming on. And we want to thank all of you who joined us out there. Please seek advice. Now, if they want to just get information from your location, where are your locations at again?
Again, we work at the Willis-Knight Community Health Centers, the one right across the street from Galilee. We're there. I'm there at that location 3 days a week, and I'm out at the other location near Southern University on Hillary Huckabee twice a week. We have a gym at the Pier Avenue location, and people can take advantage of that, the gym there, and they can come in and exercise. It's not crowded, most of the time, and so you can exercise, socially distant from everybody else. So I mean, it's there. You can take advantage of it. It's not expensive. I mean, it's $10 a month at the gym, and so you can get yourself into better health.
All right. Well, thank you guys once again. You guys have a great day. And listen, I might be reaching out for y'all to do something up there at the school. Okay. So you guys look for that call. All right. Take care. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.